Good morning. It's Friday, and I'm on my way to work. And it's time to talk Changeling. Today, I want to talk a bit about group dynamics. Now, this is my opinions. This is specifically my opinions, but it feeds into how I like to run my games, and as such, I'm hoping that someone else will be able to glean some little bit of help out of it. So, when we talk about group dynamics in Changeling, we're not necessarily talking about, your kind of group makeup. You're not trying to look for a tank and a healer and a whatever, because that's not how Changelings work. You don't have specific kiths that are good at specific things. You can have kiths that are good at a lot of things. Now, obviously, some of them do tend to be more aggressive than others, but that's not necessarily the same as being more tanky than others. So, we'll throw that part out the window right away. So, what things are important when building a functional group in Changeling? It's actually more political than balance. If you have half of a group of Seelie Changelings and half a group of Unseelie Changelings, they're not going to get on very well. So, right off the bat, step one, let's make sure that they are all part of the same court. It is possible to run cross-court politics. Maybe they're a group of ambassadors from each court that have come together for peace talks and found out that their courts aren't ready to agree, but they are. So I have been in groups, I have run groups that are mixed court, but it adds a lot of complication, and it also means that you end up splitting the party a lot. Because all of a sudden, we need to go talk to the Seelie court. Okay, you guys go do that because they're not going to let us in. And then you're dealing with the group being all divided. So let's keep it all in one court. Seelie, Unseelie, doesn't matter which, but let's keep it to one. Next bit, the commoner nobility divide. Obviously, it wasn't that long ago in their terms that they were at war. There's still some tensions. There's still some political issues that are being worked out. So how do we want the group to look? Well, maybe they're all nobles. Now, being nobles does not necessarily mean that you're a high-ranking noble. You could be a basic sir. You're all low-ranking nobles who are members of one of the larger courts. You're minor knights of the court. You've got no real political influence or power, but you are a noble. That works. Or maybe you're all commoners. You're all people who work for nobles of the court. You're all vassals. Maybe you're freeholders. Maybe you're not at court. You live somewhere away from court. You still are considered to be a member of that court, but you live apart from it. So all commoners works. All nobles works. All commoners works. Now, what if we want to mix it up? Well, that's where it starts to get a little bit awkward. Because, again, if we have half a group of nobles and half a group of commoners, why are these people traveling together? That's not a social circle. That mixes. And, again, in a lot of cases, you're likely to find, we need to go to this thing. Okay, the nobles are invited. The rest of you stay away. Stay home. how do we make a mixed group work? Well, the easiest way is if we have one noble, and then all of the commoners in the group are members of that noble's household. Okay, so maybe you're not a knight anymore. Maybe you're a little bit higher than that. Maybe you're a lord, or even a baron. And you have vassals. And here are some of your favorite vassals. Now, this does put the group into a situation of having a natural leader. Someone who has to be the front man. Because if you walk into a room and people see a noble and a bunch of commoners, they're going to speak to the noble. Period. No questions asked. They're going to speak with the noble. Now, that does not mean that you cannot have someone else in the group who takes a leadership role. But if that is the case, it's going to end up being something along the lines of the noble is addressed, and he says, thank you. Good evening. I'm glad to be here. For the technical matters, I would like you to speak to my major domo. And the noble hands them off to the person who's actually going to be doing the talking. At this point, you've got a noble who's playing the role of, I'm too important to talk to you, so talk to my servant. And that can work. In fact, I've had that work very well in games. But it means that noble takes on a certain character, and it means that major domo or whoever else it is has to understand that everything that they do has to be phrased in such a way as they are not expressing their own opinions. My lord would have you know this. My lord would have me say this. You have to at that point make your leadership, and I use the air quotes visibly there because that's exactly what people will think of. It's not actually leadership. But the major domo has to be able to make people believe that what they are doing is speaking for their lord. And that does work. I've seen it a lot. In fact, the lord and vassals setup is probably one of my favorite setups, because everyone playing nobles can be a lot of fun. It really can. If you really want to go into a heavy court intrigue game, then having you all be nobles can be pretty interesting. If you want to be connected to the court intrigue, to know what's going on in court, but you don't necessarily want to get tied up in the politics of it, then the single noble and his household is a great group. If you want to say, screw court, let's go out and be adventurers, then all commoners is probably the way to go. Now, you may already be thinking it, you may not, but there is another setup here that can work, but which gets more complicated. And so it's one that I kind of try to shy away from. I mentioned before that having half nobles and half commoners is not a social circle that really works. Now, what you can do, and what I have seen done in the past, is to have 3 nobles, 3 commoners, and the 3 commoners each report to one of the nobles. So you have 3 lords and their 3 major domos. Or one of them may have brought their general or their military advisor. But basically then to tie each of the commoners to each of the nobles so that you still have that connection. That can work. Excuse me, it's been a long week. That can work, but it's a lot more complex, because then you're dealing with 3 noble houses and their connections, and it gets tied up about who is linked to who, and I'll just leave it at that. It's not impossible. It is more complicated. If you're interested in letting it be complicated and you don't mind that, and you're aware that it will make it harder to run, then go for it. That's a fine setup. But if you're just starting in Changeling, especially, I don't recommend that one. I kind of recommend the noble and his household for a group starting out in Changeling. Now, the last bit comes down to the kiths themselves. And for this, it's not necessarily as big of a thing, but what I tend to say is that what would normally be referred to as the splat book kiths. Now, I realize in the 20th anniversary edition, they're all in the same book, but they're still divided up. You have the main kiths in the front, you have the other kiths later on, each in their individual grouping. I would normally say that if you're going to play something from the individual groupings further in the back of the book, the Native American spirits, or the Polynesian spirits, or the Chinese changelings, whichever of those, if you're looking at those, then it is best for all of you to look at that. The same one, obviously. If you're going to have one Chinese changeling spirit, all of you should probably go with Chinese changeling spirits. The reason being is, otherwise, why are you all together? Again, you start looking at, well, we're all representatives of our court. Okay, so you're all diplomats. And it means the only logical reason for your group to be together means that you all need to have the same skill set, which doesn't make for a very balanced group. The exception to that is what are normally the shadow kiths. Because I personally run the game a little bit differently than a lot of people do, the dark kiths or the shadow kiths, so the Sluagh and their shadow version, the bogies, for example, I mix those freely. I don't necessarily even consider the shadow kiths to be different. A Sluagh and a bogie could very easily both refer to themselves as Sluagh. It's just that one of them has a bit of a darker sense of humor about him and has different talents because of that. The mermaids and the maenads, they'll probably all call themselves mermaids. They probably won't introduce themselves as a maenad because they don't think of themselves like that. They think of themselves as mermaids. Some people just refer to them as evil mermaids, maenads. Police are after somebody. Ooh, more police are after somebody. Interesting. So there we are. Same court. Find the right balance, noble versus commoner. And if you're going to play a specialist group, all of you play the specialist group. That is my recommendations for creating a harmonious group in Changeling. By all means, comment below Let me know what your thoughts are if you've been playing Changeling, what you think works for a group dynamic, what you think makes sense of what I've said, where you think I'm completely out left field, and the weekend's coming up, so I'm not sure what my recording schedule will be like, but at the very least, I will be back on Monday to talk about, once again, the last episode, the last session of the Mage game. This will be the third last session, so seriously, if it's not going to be the last session, I'm just going to kill them all and make it the last session. We're getting to that point. Anyway, have a great day, and I will talk to you later.